Well, welcome everybody to the webinar Top 5 Topics to Discuss for a Successful and Secure ERP Cloud Go Live. We are 1 minute after the hour. I'm assuming there's a couple folks still getting online and getting involved with the webinar, so I'm just going to give it another minute or so, and then we're going to get started. I'm excited to have a longtime friend and colleague, Dil Khan, on with me. So this is a joint webinar between ERP Risk Advisors and SafePass.
Yeah, good to be here, Jeff. Looking forward to this important topic.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, Dil, we're old hats at this, right? So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
And I think that the challenge that we both face is kind of fighting some of the headwinds on projects. Maybe the projects aren't scoped appropriately and there's some things left out often. And fighting budgets, after the project is done, kind of going live with a less than perfect implementation, maybe not quite as secure or compliant as management really needs. And so the challenge I think we're going to face in this, we're going to discuss in this topic is how does management set the structure of the program, the overall project, put it on a better footing to be able to come out with a better outcome. And if to the extent that they decide not to have everything scoped into maybe the original implementation, how does that get done after the fact? And hopefully there's a budget for it. So I know we're 2 minutes after the hour, so I'm going to dive into slides. For those who are just joining, welcome. We are going to do brief introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call resolutions for 2024. This topic has been driven by some resolutions I've adopted this year. So New Year's resolutions and a revolution. I can't even say the word. I've created this word resolution, so we'll talk about what that means. Project objectives. What does a secure and compliant project look like? And some things to discuss with your SI, and then we will wrap up with how SafePass and ERP Risk Advisors can help. So for those who aren't familiar, ERP Risk Advisors is a risk content company for ERP systems and technology tools. Our main product is called ERP Armor, and which is what we call risk content. We're the only company in the world that has this as a category, and we'll define that as we go throughout and talk about that as we go throughout the presentation. And our content, generally speaking, is licensing roles, rules, and learning. And I'm going to let Dil introduce SafePass a bit.
Yeah, so SafePass is engaged in the business of helping customers apply technology to automate their controls and thereby reduce risk, specifically around enterprise digital systems like Cloud ERP, SAP, Workday, etc. The platform, we've been building at it for the past, really started on this journey 20 years ago. So around the same time, Jeff, you got involved with this market, and we've been building bits and pieces. And about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, we decided to do this full blown. And so we have built out the platform that is supporting over 6 million monitored users today across the globe, and it's scaling up very quickly. We have a great team in place to help you find the best way to automate your controls, especially around access governance, which is our key topic, an area of discussion today. And we love working with partners, and love the opportunity to bring Jeff and introduce them to our customers, where his team can help really make sure that the fine-grained controls that are so critical to control your business risk today are in place and effective.
Yeah, excellent. We've known each other for a long time, Adele. I've seen the evolution of your business, and you've done a great job building a world-class team and a world-class solution for organizations.
Likewise.
So, yeah, thank you. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in this space since 1997. I implemented the applications as a controller for a publicly traded company. That spent several years implementing the applications, and then have been focusing on the more broadly security control space since around 2004, since the adoption of Sarbanes-Oxley. So I'll let you give a little synopsis of your background.
Yeah, so similarly, I've been in the space for a long time. Safe Pass is an evolution of a company called Fulcrum Way, which we founded back in 2003. And prior to that, I was a CEO of a publicly listed company on NASDAQ. So got a lot of my experience around Sarbanes-Oxley by, as they say, baptism by fire. I actually signed a SOX 302 and was pretty nervous about it. Deloitte were my auditors. And then soon after that, I decided that this was going to be a great service to companies that have the same risk and worries that I felt. And so since then, we've been working very closely with enterprise companies, enterprise technology companies, major audit firms, written a book, published a lot of documentation and presentations. Jeff and I have been on this user group circuits and other areas for a long time. So that's kind of my experience, and I'm still very passionate about it, and sort of is the goal of life kind of thing for me. So it's my calling, and so continue to be amazed on how even as the more innovative new technology comes out, that risk continues to be something that we haven't really matured at, right? I would be honest. Even with all the work we have done, I think we're just scratching the surface. So I'm here to help organizations mitigate risk and improve their business operations.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this space for a long time, Adil, and we've seen, I said the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I think the challenge is for both of us trying to help management understand what are some of these systemic biases within the way that the way the world works, right? So we're not going to necessarily change the way that software like ERP software is developed or systems are implemented or secured. We may not be able to change that as a whole, but we can help certain organizations that are looking at having better outcomes, if you will, in the long run, be aware of the systemic biases within these. I call it the three industries. It's the way the software is the ERP software is developed. It is the way that the systems are implemented, and it's the way the systems are audited. And there's gaps in all three of those areas, and that's you talked about this is your calling. I think my calling is certainly to lead our organization, but apart from that, kind of unselfishly looking at the broader market, what we see, both of us see, is insecure and incomplete implementations happening on a regular basis.
Exactly. Yeah.
And my objective is to help management really be more wise in the front end, to be trained and understood what it is that they're getting themselves into, and make a 1 or 2% difference in how things are implemented. So when I first started talking about this, yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I think that's, I'm aligned with what you're saying there. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first started thinking about the topic, not only like how do we say what's wrong with projects, if you will, how do we help management have a better perspective, but what I wanted to start this first section is how do you define success for a project. So I've been in implementations on the client side. I've been implementations on the SI side. I've been in implementations on the risk advisory side. So this may not be 100% complete and perfect, but these are the things I developed as I was building this material. So there's 5 kind of core objectives, or 6 I have here. Meets organizational objectives, and I'll go through. I've got a quick slide in each one of these. Obviously, the project has to meet whatever objectives that they set for. So it's often, modernizing technology, revolutionizing, automating controls, having people feel more comfortable about what they're doing. So it meets whatever the objectives are setting out for it. The implementation is secure and compliant, and that has a lot of, as we'll also talk through today, there's a lot of variation in that, what that looks like. Security, I think secure is the same, compliant is different. Compliance requirements vary significantly from organization to organization. Staff feels like they're well trained and confident. The applications have a maintenance, they don't just, just implement them once and they just run on their own. So sustainable maintenance, we'll talk about that. known and affordable long-term cost of ownership. So management wants to know what they're getting themselves into. They want to have some certainty as to whether, not just the internal cost, but the external cost, what that looks like. And of course, for organizations that are publicly traded, passing the audit, hopefully with flying colors. So a lot of, I want to organize a lot of our time in around certain topics of really our wheelhouse, security and controls and compliance. So I'm going to fly through some of these that are a little bit, outside of our wheelhouse, if you will. But if you have any comments on this, Dill, as we go through. So meeting our organizational objectives, there's going to be operational efficiencies. So that's what success looks like. Increased effectiveness, maybe meeting customer demand. So maybe it's more proactive at having better visibility to inventory or shipping on a more consistent basis, or not, just better information as a whole. So that that's the goal of every organization, is to meet customer demand. So that was certainly going to be a common objective for projects. More automation, fewer manual processes. So the modern systems have modern workflow, right? So a lot of them are workflow-based processes. So a lot of the things that have been traditionally manual processes are being automated on a go-forward basis. So automated integration with other systems. Most organizations do not have just. I'm going to pause for a second because I realized I didn't turn off my Teams. So just give me a second, and I'm going to turn off Teams so I don't have a bunch of people messaging me. My bad. So yeah, the automation of controls and business processes is really the driving factor behind why these systems are being implemented. So get back into presentation mode here. All right, you guys can see my screen.
As you're doing that, let me just add a couple of things. So what we're seeing in the market is that, in this post-COVID world, right, that the customer, everybody who has been on the journey to digital platform, their organization, the need for hybrid work and the ability to work from anywhere is a trend that is being embedded into the new digital platforms, which is great. We're also seeing M&A activity more recently. And these are all trends that are creating a significant pressure on management to ensure that this transformation to cloud is generating the ROI. And unfortunately, we'll talk a little bit more later in your slides, Jeff, but there are a number of barriers that are getting customers from achieving these lofty goals that they've gotten the funding from the board. They can be a significant event for a company's investment and CapEx life. So we're seeing some challenges and bottlenecks, which is where we want to focus on what's keeping you from meeting these objectives.
Yep. Yeah, I think the COVID did change everything, and we've shifted our strategy significantly since the adoption of the SaaS applications. We're focusing a lot more on the edge applications that are being implemented more widely. So we do a lot of ERP Cloud, NetSuite, Workday, and then the hybrid. It's kind of the hybrid applications that are kind of combination of infrastructure, platform as a service, and SaaS, like SAP S/4HANA. But yeah, most organizations have multiple in-scope applications they're trying to integrate, whether it's a niche purchasing system or CRM systems. So integration is a challenge.
Right.
So organizational objectives, what does that look like? Now we're going to move on to secure and compliant system, and we could probably spend a whole hour talking about this. So role-based access controls being implemented, mapping job functions to or the roles themselves to jobs or positions in modern ERP systems like ERP Cloud, using auto provisioning and deprovisioning based upon job or position. So joiners, movers, leavers are automated. The implemented of a IGA solution to be able to manage the identity in and across all systems. I'm going to pause for a second there because you could probably speak for an hour on just that one topic. Adil,
yeah, we spent a lot of time on that, especially with the, as I was alluding earlier on, the new, the post-COVID world. We have seen as a combination of that, the hybrid work environment, and the threats from cybersecurity. That's been a huge challenge. So I think that creates the need to really brush and clean your roles more than ever that you have had to do on the on-premise world, where you're nicely tucked away behind a firewall, and most of your employees were working from the office behind that same firewall. Once in a while, you might give them VPN access to work remotely. I mean, that world has changed, and I think it's changed forever. We want younger generation that's coming on, the Zoomers. They all want the flexibility to work and be creative. We're being told that our jobs are going to be eliminated by AI unless we really do creative work. So we need to kind of find the value in this new market. And what does that mean to be secure and compliant today? It means your identity. It starts with your identity. It starts with your roles. So most of our customers have adopted something like an Okta or Azure or something like that for their identity management, based on the trends I just talked about, especially the ones around cybersecurity. Every day you can see in Wall Street a company or two getting attacked, or data leaks, or whatever those trends are. So back when we started, after Sarbanes-Oxley, these were not our primary concerns. We were very focused on internal controls around insiders, making sure that the three-way match happens and so forth. But today that the game has changed, and we're spending a lot of time with our customers talking about, how do you really build resilient processes and give access to your users in a way that is sustainable and keeps those threats away, yet give them the flexibility they expect at the workplace.
Yeah, the identity, the common identity across all applications and the hybrid environment. I think the one thing that we have several goals as an organization this year that I'll sprinkle in throughout this discussion. But one of it is expanding our messaging, or doing a better job of messaging our cybersecurity awareness and risk mitigation. Think the traditional cyberspace, you hit it right in the head, Adil, is it needs to be all self-contained within a data center or a secure network, so to speak. So securing the perimeter was the primary mechanism, making sure that the servers and such were patched, firewalls patched, preventing the bad guys from getting into the data center. And that's changed dramatically with a hybrid environment. We have SaaS applications, maybe there's on-prem stuff. Some organizations are trying to effectively go all virtual, so not have any data center. It's just a very, very different environment for a world for the CIO. And then the CISO is left with trying to figure out how to keep the bad guys out. So the SaaS applications have various levels of maturity, I would just say. Some of them do a really good job. So like, for example, we talk about ERP Cloud. In this presentation, ERP Cloud doesn't have any native MFA, multi-factor authentication, in it. So your local users, there are local users that typically have log in. There's a disaster recovery, there's integration accounts, there's external parties like suppliers, customers, ex-employees, for example. How are you going to manage those identities, and what is management going to do to prevent just the basic phishing attacks, so stolen identities? And we've seen that threat actors are becoming that much more sophisticated. We saw that through the MGM attack. That was a pretty significant, public event. People saw it all over the world. And that was actually done through social engineering. So there's some things that can be prevented, and there's other things that almost are impossible. So you got to throw up a lot of, you got to do a lot in this modern environment, and identity management is the starting point for that. So thoughts, Adil?
Yeah, this goes back to your, the three items you said at the beginning, the software vendors, the implementers, and the auditors, right? I want to tie that back to that thought by saying that, so because this world has changed, the stress, it's no fault of any one group that I want to point fingers at, but the software that was built 15 years ago that you guys are buying now, and implementers that are used to, implementing this waterfall approach in an on-premise world, are shifting to this new reality And then, of course, auditors as well are having to audit these complex systems. So security and compliance, which was very finite and easy to manage compared to what it is today, could be done by just hard work and following best practices. But organizations like SafePass and ERP advisors have sort of stepped in to help companies do that now, because the problem has exponentially grown, as we just talked about here, discussed. So security and compliance no longer can be done by a generalist. You are seeing that in the industry. There are specialists like us coming into the market. Whether unfortunately, a lot of the investment has gone into cybersecurity, niche areas where you can protect a very small chunk of it. But our customers are scratching their heads. They're talking to their system integrators and their auditors, and what we hear from them is they're getting partial answers, right? And so nobody's stepping up and saying, hey, end to end, you need to protect your enterprise, and here are the controls that you must have in your roles, the way you design them, in the way you run interfaces, this is the way you set up service accounts. So organizations like ours are here to help, fill that gap that we see in the market, where the traditional software vendors and the system integrators are challenged in the new reality.
Yeah, and to not let the CISO off the hook here. The fourth industry that really needs to evolve. We talked about the ERP systems themselves being developed, the SI side of it, the implementation, and then the auditing of this. The fourth industry that really needs to evolve is the cyber risk industry. And I don't think that so they don't really have an offering for SaaS applications, I think is the best way to think about it. Management generally looks at a SaaS application and the traditional view of securing the perimeter and administrative access that is handled by the application provider now. So that's handled by Oracle in the context of ERP Cloud. It's handled by Workday in the context of Workday applications. And so it's a check the box exercise, because the SOC report provides quote unquote management the assurance that the perimeter is secured. The reality is each of the SaaS applications across the board have different risks associated with them. So getting into this next topic, SSO, MFA, enforced for all users. And so there's a concept of user categories within ERP Cloud. There's a bifurcation of how SSO, MFA is implemented, whether they're local logins or what MFA provider. So maybe there's Azure for internal employees, and they'd be using something like Okta, or trying to implement something for MFA for supplier, the supplier portal. Like supplier portal, just as an example, this is a common example probably really across all SaaS applications. When suppliers are invited to register, and then they're submitting invoices, they're also potentially maintaining their own bank account information that they're going to be paid through ACH. And so one of the fraud risks, which really can also be categorized as a compliance risk, because it could be substantial in dollar amounts, or it could be material, is that suppliers giving up their credentials in a phishing attack, and the threat actor coming in, changing the bank account, redirecting future payments to fraudulent accounts. And that is a use case we've seen in the market today that, frankly, it's not just unique to ERP Cloud, but it's probably unique across all SaaS applications. So that's not something that a cyber company is going to have the expertise to evaluate. Their pen test and their securing the environment and the perimeter, so to speak, that's not their expertise. So we intend to fulfill that market. We have that expertise already. We're domain experts in SaaS applications. From a role design perspective, we know how these systems are implemented from an overall security perspective. So what has to happen to kind of put a program together around that, integrate that with your security operations center, network operations center, which are local logins, which are not, which are the areas where you have the risk, and in some cases the risk is pushed out beyond your control, like suppliers or other people that have those logins outside the system. Either management has to accept the risk or monitor the risk to some extent. There's some things you can do in a limited fashion to monitor those risks, or there has to be another multi-factor authentication process, or in this case, we hope that Oracle eventually implements native MFA within the ERP Cloud, the identity management process. So we've talked about consistent identity across all systems. That's a challenge. It could be automated through things like Azure, but that isn't going to be the case for all different categories of users. And then a secure and compliant system also looks like automation of ITGCs, enabling audit policies. That's a big thing we struggle with clients. There's kind of a bias towards turning on logging, and there shouldn't be. Audit logging is safe, secure, it doesn't cause performance issues, and that's obviously necessary for not just ITGCs, but many financial controls as well. So that's a good, we'll revisit some of these topics when we get into some of those discussions we think that managers should be having with customers, but we'll go on to a couple of these other components. What a complete implementation also looks like: well-trained and confident staff. So role-based training, role-based job aids, clearly defined policies and procedures. For IT, well-defined IT support processes. And that's a challenge, to be honest. A lot of organizations are facing right now is who should be doing what? What should the SI be doing? What should a managed services team be doing? How does the transition from go live to hypercare to everyday care happen? Certainly roles and responsibilities, so system roles need to be built based upon what the intent of management is. And often management, I would say, defaults to quote unquote the experts. So they give keys to the kingdom to the SI during hypercare. The managed service organization, when we see the roles of managed services company taking over, they're often dramatically over provisioned. And I would say to management, like, do you really want to allow, let's just say, a managed service team, an offshore team that you don't even know who those people are onboarding? Even though we have a contract, do you want to set them up to be able to maintain supplier bank accounts, for example, given that ability? So there's FBDI processes, there's APIs, there's web services. So none of those things should be exposed to external parties, in my opinion. The support process, troubleshooting should be done, training should be done. Most issues from a support perspective are training. And then what level of risk management should be taking with the SI during a rollout process or hypercare process, during a managed services organization and a long-term managed services contract. You don't default to what those organizations say they need. Management needs to set the perimeter up to what they really feel comfortable from a risk perspective. And so that's sometimes we spend a lot of time talking with management. So tell us about your support contract, or what is it you're actually going to, in theory, allow your SI to do during hypercare. There's been one case that we know of. A customer of ours had, they became a customer after this. I'm not going to tell you that we gave them this advice in the front end, but what they were doing with the SI, they used basically a service account for all hypercare updates. So the SI had one login, and hypercare extended beyond hypercare period. So it was like 1 month led into 2 months, led into 3 months, and effectively you had one generic account being used by dozens of people making updates, and management had no controls over that, and that led to, for this organization, 2 significant deficiencies. Kind of lucky it probably wasn't a material weakness. Yeah. So you've seen some of those experiences, I'm sure, in your career, right, Adil?
Yeah, we were just talking to you, Jeff, just last week, I think, or we have a client, international client that is growing very rapidly in a semiconductor industry that wanted to get cloud ERP up running fast, and time to market is a key guidance or direction from the board and management, especially around ERP projects. One of the value propositions that cloud vendors offer to the market is that, hey, we can get you up and running a lot faster than the old on-premise world. So there's significant pressure on SIs and the software vendors to get their products up and running fast. But as I mentioned to you, Jeff, that in our discussions, is that they forget about role design. They say, okay, one
Mm-hmm.
way we can do fast is not waste all the time in building all these roles that people can't seem to decide what they want. And it's unfortunate they don't have the skill sets. By they, I mean the SIs and even the customers, because they're brand new to this technology, the customer is. So they're giving a very high level guidance. Here's our policy. We don't want people that create suppliers to pay suppliers. On the other hand, you have a boxed in project and there's pressure to get to live. So the first thing that gets cut off, or one of the first things, is roles. Look, we already got roles, seeded roles. We'll use those out of the box and we'll take you live. So even before you get to the point you were talking about, this customer managed services with that service account, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing before even hypercare, just during the implementation, they're just not spending enough time to really do a fine grained analysis of
Mm-hmm.
roles that are going to make your organization productive, sustainable, and keep them safe, from audit findings and fraud and all of those bottlenecks that happen because of poor roles. It's not just about compliance, it's about performance and results too, but it gets overlooked. And it's unfortunate when we bring yourselves in, for example, it's the tab is higher because now you've got to undo a lot of the work and you got to take them a step backwards because you can't approve to go to UAT because the auditors will come down and say, no, your roles are giving keys to the kingdom. So that's another aspect I wanted to add to the story around not only just hypercare and managed services, which we're seeing a big trend in the cloud. That seems to be the way customers are right sizing their IT organizations. They're outsourcing a lot of the as they're moving to cloud, they're also outsourcing that managed services components, and
Mm-hmm.
they have elevated access, like you rightfully said. But we're seeing that, and then let's be, people care about dollars and cents at some point too. So let's talk about ROI. One of the things that I've seen is if you don't do this right, not only you're paying more to get it done right, your ticket, your ticker is still running, your meter is still running, while we fix the role. So getting it done up front, is the best way to do it. But I've also seen that, let's say you introduce these, managed services, whether it's a one user, like you said, Jeff, or many users from a partner that is now doing your supplier maintenance or customer maintenance, whatever master data they're touching, configuration they're managing. Now you
Mm-hmm.
got to explain to the auditor, did they do anything nefarious while they were in there? Did they add themselves as a supplier? Well, how do you do that? Well, that's tough because now you've got to go and build a bunch of reports in, since we're talking Oracle, in OTBI or whatever the tools you have. And now you've got to prove to the auditor that just because your managed service provider had the ability to create supplier, pay supplier, they didn't in fact create, a few of their friends as suppliers. So the workload just exponentially increases if you don't do this kind of design work up front. That's kind of another aspect to the story on managed services.
Yeah, and that's the systemic bias. So let's just talk about practically how an implementation is done and what customization we see in roles versus perhaps what should be done. So what is happening today versus what's ideal? What happens today is predominantly an SI is going to convince management to use seeded roles as much as possible. So the pre-built roles, and those pre-built roles are meant to provide the access they need to do a job function. So they're designed to do what they're supposed to do, which is execute business processes. The reality is, I could find this. I could say this with certainty. The roles that Oracle or other application providers provide always have things in them that shouldn't be in them. And so we're talking about ERP Cloud today. So when we go through an analysis post go live, we're touching 100% of, like, literally every role has to be remediated. So, or a role has to be replaced with a new custom role.
Wow.
It's across the board, and so we're doing those. We can do those projects in 4 to 6 weeks in some cases. We're bidding against companies that are putting 6 to 9 month budgets in place for that same amount of work. The challenge is for management during the project is they don't do any negative regression testing. So what that means is they don't test to see if a role has access they shouldn't have. The tests that are being done during CRP and UAT is, can you perform the job function using these roles? And the SI and the software provider may not even be aware, oftentimes isn't even aware that the roles are over provisioned. Their goal is just to get the system live on time, on budget, and they don't have the knowledge to understand what the implications of these over provisioned roles are once the auditors come in after the fact, or once we come in, or some other companies that are skilled in this area come in and expose some of these issues to management. So it is inherent with the way these industries work, the SI industry in general. And as Adil pointed out, the pressures of the board to get the system up and running on time. If I'm on the board, if I'm a project PMO, I would want a secure system going live, right? So the question is, how, as you ask the SI, how do you ensure that the system when it's live is going to meet our objectives from a security compliance and a cyber perspective as well? And this is where the CISOs are a little bit out in the dark right now, because if they say, hey, can you come in and test our ERP Cloud implementation to make sure it is, we understand the cyber risks and we're managing them. Even the CISO doesn't have anybody to go to, because the traditional cyber approaches is quote unquote handled by, in this case, Oracle, securing the perimeter and administrative access. So these industries haven't really adapted to the new reality, and I think it does take time to evolve business models. But inherently, like a system integrator is going to bid a project that's going to hand management almost 100% of the time an insecure and non-compliant, if you're talking about from a SOX perspective, system. So then the question is, what do I do after the fact? So I'm jumping ahead on some of the slides here, but we've hit on some of these things. Staff has to be well trained and confident and support the applications, and that not only includes internal staff, but in the long run, managed services clients, and just all those categories of people need to have roles that are based upon the principle of least privilege. The other thing that management significantly underestimates and SIs do not prepare clients for is sustainable maintenance. All the SaaS applications have regularly patched cycles. So for Oracle, it's 4 times a year. For Workday in NetSuite, for example, there's 2 times a year. You're going to get semi-annual or quarterly patches. And so management needs to be set up for success in the long run. And if I'm an SI, I'm going to say to management, okay, we have 2 things we need to do. We need to get your system live on time, on budget, and we need to prepare you for a quarterly patch process that happens. I would provide that as a service as an SI to management, as an add-on to differentiate myself from other SIs that are not going to be in that same position to be able to provide that. Management, when they get to that first quarterly patch process, they're like, oh crap, we're 3 months post go live, or maybe not even 3 months. Maybe they can defer it to 4 or 5 months, defer a patch. But now they're like, okay, no, we have an upgrade project. We have an upgrade project. Like, our system's going to be upgraded whether we want it or not, because that's what we signed up for in the SaaS applications. And that window of that upgrade, from the time that we understand the impact of that upgrade to the time it hits production, is 2 weeks, which is insane, right? If you think about, for those that are familiar with like on-prem systems, you may be doing an upgrade project once every few years, and that is a 6 to 9 month project. There's a lot of technical upgrades that happen. There's technical aspects that have to happen that Oracle handles, but nonetheless, management has to think about, how do I manage, identify and manage the change that Oracle's patching in my application in a 2 week window. That is no small feat. So that sustainable maintenance does look like a structured staff process, making sure that everybody understands what to do during the patch process, and then the life cycle of the application as well, from an IT support, administration, reporting, change management, outside of the quarterly patch process, and things that happen between patches. And on top of all that, you have to be prepared for the audit. So it's not so financial audit and the IT audit is also part of sustainable maintenance. Long-term cost of ownership for the organization has been live for a long time. What does it look like? There will be price increases by Oracle. So what you build into contracts in the front end, that's a huge part of, once you're once you're live, you're live. You're married to Oracle in the long run. So you've got to, how do you figure out how to make sure that the cost of owning the application is appropriately managed? We do a lot of work, and a lot of our role remediation work is in around license risk reduction or license cost reduction. We're actually reducing costs, or we're reducing the risk of cost increases, partly, mostly because of the use of seated roles, or we call hybrid roles, which is roles that are partially customized, but still going to hit multiple licensing buckets. Most of the roles out of the box, they do the job functions that they need them to do, but they hit multiple license buckets. So that's part of our job in customizing roles for clients, is to eliminate unnecessary licenses, and that's fairly easy to do. So some SIs have practices around this. You can remove specific privileges, partially customize the roles, build some partially customized roles, and remove licensing issues. But we do that at one full swoop. When we're going through a project, we're going to pull out the unnecessary license privileges, and we're going to reduce risk, sense of access, and segregation of these risks within roles all at once. So you don't want to have multiple change management cycles and multiple role remediation processes. You want to do one: reduce licenses, reduce license exposure, unexpected usage, and pull out all the things out of it that should not be in them. So long-term cost of ownership, as an organization expands, you acquire other organizations, your business grows, hopefully. This has to have sustainability and budget. Role-based budgeting for license consumption is the goal for most organizations. And then pass this audit. We've hit on some of these things. I'm going to kind of, in the essence of time, I want to get to these 5 gaps. We've hit on these, but I want to make sure we've hit on some of these already, but I want to make sure we cover these specifically, these next 2 slides. So before I do that, Adil, any comments on the last couple of slides that we worked through?
No, I think let's move on to the gaps. I think that's where some of the useful information will come from.
Got it. Okay. So having sustainability over sustainable costs in the long term. Most SIs don't have a really good program, or have any program related to understanding what your license costs are going into production. So that it's very much an art. You have to understand the licensing schemes, what's licensed, and most of the time that's not even a factor in a project. So one question you could ask your SI is, how can you minimize license costs while still getting the full functionality of the system? How do I determine what my license needs are? How do I manage them? SIs really aren't in a position to answer those questions, to be honest. Most of them aren't. There are some SIs that have developed some of this knowledge to do role remediation. So they understand what privileges hit which license buckets. So some of them have that, but most of them will have, if you ask the question, how to determine what my licensing needs are and manage them, where am I at relative to what I've purchased when I go live? Most SIs are not going to be able to answer that question for you. How am I going to get rid of license overages without customizing roles? So we have a data sheet that gives some examples of, like, the buyer role hits 6 licenses, the application implementation consultant role hits like 20+ licenses. So you can pull our data sheet down if you're interested in getting some examples. We have a data sheet specifically to license management to see some examples of what buckets are hitting. And there's some very interesting schemes out there. I mean, I would say you really want to have a discussion with us and maybe some other specialists in this area before you purchase licenses from Oracle. So whether you're licensing by employee, so named users versus named employees, or employee count, 2 different schemes. There are cases where, for example, there have been effectively enterprise licenses for self-service procurement, which is really requisitioning, when not all your employees, for example, are going to be entering requisitions. So you can make a poor decision on the licensing front end of how you may inadvertently or advertently, Oracle may be taking you down a path that may not make sense for you. So from a licensing perspective, and so there's some challenges there. And the reality is, if you are using seeded roles, you're either consuming licenses you don't have, so you're going to have unexpected uses in your service usage metrics report, or you're consuming licenses, more licenses than you license for the products that you licensed. So you're already at risk for Oracle billing you for additional licenses. So there's very much an art of having a relationship with Oracle prior to, signing your license agreement, and then on an ongoing basis, how do you manage that risk, that exposure? The good thing about ERP Cloud, I think, relative like EBS, for example, is it's pretty easy to understand the licensing model. But it does require customization of roles, and that's part of what drives our role customization process is definitely licensing. And then something I know that we've hit on quite a bit already, but we'll go through more detail. Security design, including SOD and sensitive access risk, is not baked into the project or fully baked. And I'm gonna step back a little bit and pick on some of the large SIs. And some large SIs have a SI practice, a traditional implementation practice, and then they have a risk advisory practice. And it's fairly common for organizations to say, we're going to use, name A for both. We're going to hire them to do both our implementation and our risk advisory, and that's what I would be akin to like hiring the fox to watch the hen house. The risk advisory team should be a check and balance against what's happening from an SI perspective. So if you risk advisory team, if you expect a risk advisory team to come in and audit the security of your SI, which is the same firm, and tell you that the SI hasn't done their job prior to go live, or even giving you, some feedback after go live, then you don't know human history and tendencies. Your SI practice is not going to be ratting out your your risk advisory practice with the same firm is not going to rat out your SI firm for doing a poor job. You need to have a separate risk advisory firm, or at least somebody that's somebody else like us. We could do that for you. That is the check and balance versus the risk advisory team and the SI practice, understanding and giving you some feedback on go live readiness and audit readiness. So custom role design is either not included in the project at all, or not fully baked into the project, both in cost and timeline. So when you're building custom roles, you need to have those roles tested prior to and at least once fully tested and validated in one cycle prior to UAT. And so I know, Adele, you probably have some worst case horror stories in this area as well, of organizations not having tested their roles at all, or having gone live with a lot of issues. So maybe you can chime in with some thoughts here.
Yeah, we've been doing this work to help customers improve controls in their cloud ERP for 6+ years now, and it's like most of the implementations that I've seen kind of fall into this category that you just outlined, where they would either not have anybody look at the roles, or they would have their own organization, risk advisory, as you said, come in and give it a green light, and then the customer gets slammed during the audit from the externals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're not in the same business as you are. We'd love to bring you into every account where the customer has the budget. Many times it's, oh wow, we just didn't know that, and now it's a deer in the headlight. Where do we have to go back to the board or the senior management, ask for more money, and they've already spent this money. So it puts you as our customers, it puts our customers in a really bad situation, and we don't want to be on the sidelines. So one of the things we're offering to our customers is something called an enterprise roles manager. So it helps you minimize that cost of rebuilding it. Just like Jeff talked about the ability where they can take the 6 or 8 month effort and, that might take to clean up a role if you're doing everything from scratch, versus using, Jeff, I know you guys have templates and really the skill set to go with it, to quickly get things done quickly. We
Mm-hmm.
also think about our customers from a sustainability perspective. And so what Roles Manager does as just one of the utilities tools, if you will, part of our suite of access management products, where it will go and simulate the role. And if there's any potential SOD risks, you can catch that. And if you're working with Jeff and his team, they can advise you, look, you may want to replace this GL manager role with this ERP advisory GL manager because you can't create and post journals or whatever the case may be, right? Or they can work with you to quickly remove that. The point I'm trying to make is that we understand this is something that's just happening the way the markets are today. So we're here to help you at least minimize that cost and risk of ending up with custom roles that are not going to fly the ultimate audit. So
Mm-hmm.
Roles Manager is a good utility that I just thought of mentioning, that you can look on our website or talk to some of our team members where if you are in a situation where you need to automate that process, talk to experts like Jeff, and then if you want tools, to help streamline and simulate. And really, it's a preventive control, the way I tell my customers that now that you learned the lesson, moving forward, you're never going to make that mistake, hopefully. So what you
Mm-hmm.
do is you basically stop doing, because you're going to have upgrades too, like Jeff was saying, every few months. So it's better to simulate that in a non-prod environment because you're under the gun to get that patch in to prod and be able to see, okay, did my self-service procurement now suddenly have the ability to create supplier and update bank accounts? I don't want to get that and have to explain, oh yeah, I found the risk and I remediated it, because that takes a while. So how long the risk was still open? So those are just some kind of experiences in real world battlefields that we have been fighting over the last few years.
Yeah, I'll give you one example on poor role design. This is probably, I'll give you two takeaways right now that I think are going to be critical. So if you haven't focused in on what we've been saying to this point, I'm going to give you two things that I think you should take back to management. Number one, there has to be a budget for call it cleanup work or maturity work after the go live process. So if whatever, let's say your budget's $10 million, 5 to 10% of that project budget should be saved for after go live. And if you don't believe me that that is needed, management just needs to talk to other companies that have gone through similar projects and ask them what do they do after the fact? What do they have to do after the fact that wasn't built in? So we've talked about some of these things already. Having automation in around security SOD is one of those things that often doesn't get done prior to the implementation that needs to get done. We use the analogy of a crawl, walk, run. So most organizations are in the crawl phase. Coming out, we typically see a 6 to 9 month remediation project to get roles back in line to align with jobs or positions. So true role-based access control. And then you're wanting, as Adil mentioned, like you want to analyze those roles and changes as you're going through the process to make sure that they're sustainable and they meet your compliance objectives. So implementation of software typically, in our opinion, happens in the run phase. You clean up roles, then you automate the provisioning and deprovisioning. Well, IGA should be done as really part of day one, but the SOD and sensitive access testing and automation of that around that, you want to be maturing that as you're redesigning the roles. So that there needs to be a budget for that after go live as well. And then the run phase is more. Well, I've got another whole webinar on that topic. So what means that? But I'm coming out with an article on this next month in our newsletter. If you're a subscriber, I'll have an article specifically on the crawl, walk, run approach that we talk about.
Great.
And then the 5 to 10% budget, that'd be one thing. We both Adil and I have talked a lot about vendor fraud, and around inappropriate management of vendor master maintenance. And if you're not familiar with this particular risk in an ERP Cloud environment, so for those that are familiar with FBDI processes, there are FBDI or spreadsheet upload processes that typically are used by the SI to be able to convert data during the implementation and should not be available to users in theory after go live. and we see a couple of significant privileges in and around supplier loading of suppliers and maintaining suppliers that gives people backdoor access to be able to maintain suppliers through a spreadsheet upload process. We see that in 100% of implementations post go live. I mean, it's certainly in there in the big mega roles like application implementation consultant role and some of the other implementation roles have these FBDI privileges built into them. So if you're handing over, your during hypercare or your managed services provider, you're handing over privileges or seated roles that have like the AIC role, we call it for short, application implementation consultant. If you're assigning that role as a base role for organizations or even customized versions of that, you're giving your IT staff in some cases you're outsourcing, your hypercare or managed service to an organization that can commit material fraud in your organization through entering and maintaining supplier data through spreadsheet upload processes that are not subject to workflow. So often when we present, that's one of the first things we talk about with management is you spend all this money implementing really expensive workflow processes, really high-end modern workflow processes, but you have X number of people that can bypass those. So your implementation, your system is not secure until you remove those, just looking at FBDI processes in of themselves. And then there's APIs and web services and even front-end access we still find that people have access to. But inherently, we find a lot of people that have the ability to commit material supplier fraud. And I do mean material, and I can go through and defend that comment on a call. But, that's the reality is that SIs, they will help you confirm that you can do your job, and people can do their job once they're live, hopefully, but they have no ability during a project to tell you what risk you're taking that are in roles, either seated roles or partially customized roles that people shouldn't have access to. And that's where if you're using a large SI and they have a risk advisory firm, the risk advisory firm is not going to come in and say, oh, our SI team left a bunch of stuff in these roles that shouldn't have. That's the question I have on slide number 2. Will you guarantee your work, right? So what ends up happening is the typical SI approach is tell us what your requirements are. They do what your requirements are. They don't tell you what you should be doing. They do what you ask them to do, and then they won't guarantee their work because they didn't give you the roles. They asked for your requirements. It's kind of a cat and mouse game. So what guarantee work would look like in that case is the roles are massively over provisioned. The SI's got to come in and do that work for free to fix them, and you're never going to find a contract where that's allowable. I think we've hit on all these for the most part. These slides will be made available to you as well. I mean, some of these topics we could go on to for a lot longer time, but at this point, I'm gonna wrap up just in interest of time and making sure we're finished on time. But there's a few other things here. Change orders can be expected. Project, I mentioned that not training on quarterly patch processes or the PAT or PTT processes. So I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. My goal really this year, to be honest, is to have interviews with organizations and guys like Adil who've been in this process for a long time and develop a training class. Probably realistically will be a lifelong effort from this point to help management have the right information they need to make good decisions on before they sign a contract with a software provider, before they sign a contract with an SI, to avoid these issues by having some of these discussions. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks to Adil again for joining me. Maybe we should have made this a 2-hour webinar. Maybe next time we'll cover some more topics, but your insight's always invaluable. So thanks, Adil, for everything.
Thanks for inviting us, Jeff. This was excellent. Hopefully we were able to share some items that will help the folks improve their projects. That's what we're after.
Yep, and here's some contact information from us, and then Emma on behalf of SafePass. So we appreciate everybody's time. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.